My name is Lovell Lee. I'm born and raised in Alexandria, Virginia. I grew up in the area of Alexandria called Sunnyside, which is in the northwest corner of the city. Uh, that area was a little history about the Sunnyside. In 1870, a gentleman named Charles Watson purchased a little over 11 acres, which is turned out to be Sunnyside. And he passed away in 1874. And he left the property to his wife and his three sons. And in 1905, they had the property surveyed with the express purpose of selling it to black families in the former black neighborhood. And so they did do that, and later on, in the 1920s, black families moved in. And my mom and dad purchased property out there in 1925. And shortly after, others began to move in, and it eventually became a neighborhood of about 15 black families. And it was pretty unique because all around us was entirely white. This gentleman had the foresight to purchase that property back then, and he said they named it Sunnyside because he said the only way people could accumulate wealth was purchase property, and that way the sunny side would be to gain wealth. And so it was named Sunnyside. And so, like as I said before, my parents moved in 1925, and I'm a sibling. My parents had four siblings. We were all born and raised in that house, and my oldest brother was born in 1926. He was born in Arlington County, and the three of us later came along later. We were born in the same house. We were born in Alexandria, Virginia. So Alexandria annexed that property somewhere between 1926 and 27. And Sunnyside was a wonderful place to grow up. It was single-family homes, had a lot of property, and it was a close-knit community. And as I said before, it was about 15 families, and it was a wonderful place to grow up. And it was somewhat of a hard place to grow up because they did not have city water, running water, and they did not have sewer hookup. So as I look back, the people lived there. It was pretty much country because it didn't have these amenities that you have today and you take for granted. So my mother, I recall, she had to wash clothes on the washboard in a great big tin tub, and I would help her at times. And the way we had to get our water was from a pump in the backyard. We would go out there and pump water. In the summertime, the well was about maybe 30-some feet deep, but the water comes up, it was nice and cool. And it never froze in the summertime, so we had always had available water. But we did not have central heat, so we cooked, with coal in the kitchen, big old iron pot-belly stove. And we had also heat in the dining room. I lived in a fairly large house. It was like three bedrooms with a place for a fourth. We had a living room, dining room, kitchen, and had two living rooms, as a matter of fact. And so my father was a pretty handy person. So like I say, we heated with coal. So he built a big coal bin down in the basement. So when the coal would be delivered, they would open the basement window and put the coal in through the basement window. And back in those times, it was during World War II, actually, and things were pretty tight. And my mother would tell me and my brother, he was like 18 months older than I was at the time, we would sit at the window and count how many bags. They had big bags, and each bag was a bushel. And so many bushels made a ton. And when my father would purchase coal by the ton, 1 ton or 2 tons, whatever, and we'd sit there and count the bushels that was going on in the basement. Also during that time, like I said before, it was during World War II, and everything was tight. And we had rationing coupons. If you had to go to the store, depending upon the size of your family, they would issue coupons, and when you go to the store to purchase your food, you had to turn in the coupons. And so that was things were tight because the war was going on, and but we did have enough. We did have enough to survive on. Also during the war, Fort Myer was not too far from where we live, up in Arlington, Virginia. And early in the morning, you could hear reveille. They would blow the trumpets for whatever they do in the morning, and you could hear them from there. And on occasions, when the troops would be shipping out to the war zone, they would march in formation down the Glebe Road, which was a street was up from where we live. And hundreds of troops, we would go up there and watch them as they were marching off to war. And we thought that was pretty cool at the time. Also, during the war, we'd have what's called blackouts. They called the air raids practice, and they had air raid wardens, the people that were designated air raid wardens to walk around in the neighborhoods and make sure everybody would cut their lights out. And the lights would all be out for like a matter of an hour or two, whatever. And then they would sound the siren, and the lights would come back on. As I said, it was pretty rough growing up because we didn't have the running water and whatnot. So we did not get a sewer hookup of running water until 1949. So it was like a country existence somewhat in the city, but there was a lot of undeveloped land when I was growing up, and we had room to roam, and we did. We could play in the woods, which we did. We would play war because the war was going on, and shortly thereafter, we would play cowboys and Indians. We would leave out in the morning after breakfast and come back for lunch and go out again and play all day long. It was really a nice place to grow up, you know. And so when we started the school, we had to use public transportation. And back then, it was segregated. Everything was segregated in Alexandria, Virginia. And we had to sit in the bus behind the back door. And you could not, I think it was a law, as a matter of fact, but you had to sit back then. I don't think that changed until like the early 50s, maybe 1952. So sometimes some mean-spirited white folks would come and sit in your section and fill it up, and you wouldn't have no place to sit because you could not sit beyond the back door. So you'd have to stand up. And we would go to school and catch the bus right up from where I live on Glebe Road. And up in Beverly Hills at the time, it was known as Beverly Hills. It probably still is. Maybe the names have changed since then, but it was an influx, a heavy influx of white kids would get on the bus and they would sit in the back where we was designated for blacks. And fortunately, we would get on first and they would get on later, but at times there were spaces that they would occupy and you would have to stand up. And so this existed, like I said, until 1952, until I think the law was passed that you couldn't discriminate on public transportation anymore. So, but when I was very young, we went to kindergarten. I recall my mother used to take us up to put us on the bus, and we knew where to get off. It was West Street and Onoka. When the kindergarten was located in the, let's see, I think it was the 1000 block of Onoka Street, and the house is still there, but it's been remodeled as you might expect. But we went to kindergarten there, and my mother would put us on the bus in the morning, and we would walk 2 blocks to kindergarten. Sometimes, and most times, my brother, who was older, he would come by, and after it was Parker Gray, which wasn't too far away, a matter just a couple blocks away, and pick us up, take us to West Street and Onoka, put us on the bus. And when we get to our stop, my mother would be waiting there to pick us up, to take us home. So we did that until we graduated from kindergarten. We went to Parker Gray. in first grade, and at that time, the first grade was only first and second grade. They only had half a day school. Like you go to school at 9 o'clock, you get out at 12, and you had 2 sessions, and from 12 o'clock to 3. So we would go to school in the morning and for a while, and then after a while we would switch and go to school in the afternoon. And that lasted for 2 years. And then when you got to third grade, you'd be going to school all day long. And at Parker Gray, they went 1 through fourth grade. And when you got to fifth grade, you would have to go to Lodge Crouch, which is located on the south side of Alexandria. Now it's called Lodge Crouch Academy, I believe. I'm not sure. The location is still the same place, but it was not too good a building to go to school in. My mother told me it was originally a silk factory. So, and then they converted to a school for black kids because of overcrowding. And once you finish your sixth grade, you come back to Parker Gray for the seventh grade. And along the lines of for schooling, the schools that we went to, they weren't up to the standards of the white schools. During the time that I was going to public schools here in Alexandria, T.C. Williams was the superintendent. And T.C. Williams, people referred to him as a segregation, but T.C. Williams was a racist. He was a racist because we got hand-me-down books. We rarely did we get new books. The new books would go to the white schools, and we would get, in September, we would get hand-me-down books, and you could see where the entries, where the books, when you used to sign out books for kids, and you could see where the sign-out page had been completely used up, and they had to put additional pages in there to something signed out. Once in a while, we maybe get 10% new books, but most of the time we got the old hand-me-down books. And the school system, the schools themselves weren't up to the standards of the white schools, but that's what we had to contend with. I'd like to digress a little bit about the neighborhood I grew up in. Like I said before, it was as I look back, it was rather hard existence growing up in Sunnyside, but it was a nice place to grow up because people were very friendly. People didn't lock the doors. Everybody knew everybody. And back then, if somebody ran out some sugar or flour or whatever they could go next door and borrow some, and you would vice versa. And so it was really a wonderful place as I look back, and I'm glad I had the opportunity to grow up in that neighborhood. So as time goes on, I go to from elementary school to high school and Parker Gray. And Parker Gray, I remember Parker Gray was built, the new Parker Gray was built in 1950. And as we looked at that school, man, we were so happy to get a brand new school. But even though Parker Gray was built in 1950 and GW was built in 1935, the school that they built for us still was not up to the standards for the white school that was even built in 1935. They did not have a football field. They did not have a baseball field. They did not have a separate auditorium. As I look back, it was a lot of inequities in the school system, as I said before. And one thing I'm really ashamed of, and I'm almost ashamed to admit it, right? But I played on the football team, and where Simpson Field is located right now, that's where we had to play at football games. And the city did not provide transportation from Parker Gray, which is located on Madison Street, to Simpson Field, which was about maybe a mile, maybe 3/4 of a mile. I'm not really sure to get there. So you even had to walk. As a football team, we had to go travel there in a trash truck. Terrible, and that's the only way we could get there. Because the football team, I don't know, 30, 40 players on the team, and the game started generally at 7 o'clock. Like I said, the city school system did not provide us transportation, so we had to go there in a trash truck or whatever transportation we could get. Whereas GW had that nice big football field and their facilities right up behind the school. And this is all because of T.C. Williams, our uh, superintendentship. I also recall when we graduated, or the graduating classes were before me, uh, T.C. Williams was always attend GW's graduation. Uh, he would not attend Parker Gray's graduation. He never would. He never came. All he sent was a representative, and that's just the way it was back then, because Alexandria, as a whole, was a very segregated city. Even though you had pockets of places where blacks and whites lived next door to each other, it was still segregated. And even as I was growing up, I had white friends where we played together and had a good time together. They would go to school, separate schools, of course, and we would always talk about how we would like to go to a movie together. Which if we had to do so, we'd have to go to D.C. Well, we wasn't old enough to do that at the time. So, but that's the way Alexandria was. I recall when you go into on King Street to People's Drugstore, whatever, you would have to go to the end of the counter because they had what they call soda fountains back then. People sitting there and enjoying themselves. But blacks had to stand at the end of the corner, at the end of the counter, and at times they would let you stand there for a while, and they would wait on whites who were coming before you, and you either wanted to stay there and waited to get what you wanted, or you walked out. That was one of the things that was so common in Alexandria time. You could not try on clothes, or my mother would take us shopping, but very rarely, because we would usually go to D.C. to do our shopping for us. And one of the things we used to enjoy, we'd go to D.C. with my mother, and I still recall the stores. It was Hecht's, it was Landsberg's, it was Goldenberg's, and it was pretty much in a pretty close area. And one thing we looked forward to was catching the bus going to D.C. And at that time, the buses would go in through the Pentagon, and the Pentagon buses would go through, and we thought that was pretty cool because it was like going through a tunnel. And we would spend the day in D.C. shopping, and that was a nice experience for us. Also, I'm trying to recall, I don't want to miss anything. I did stay in the area. I don't want to jump to high school after the graduation that quick. I know I'm trying to recall some things in my childhood that are, oh yeah, Christmas time. I want to start with Christmas time. Christmas time was a real festive time in our house. Back then, people during Christmas time, they really visited people, and vice versa. So we would always have a nice big tree in the house. We had a nice sized house. It was like a 6-7 room house, and we'd have a few lights outside, not many because we couldn't afford too much. But my mother used to make root beer, homemade root beer, and beer. And so she'd make like 2 cases of beer and like maybe a case and a half of root beer, as much as about she had the bottles. And we had these homemade, she would have these 5-gallon ceramic crocks pot. She would, I can't recall the ingredients she would put in there. She would put yeast in there. She would put some malt in there. I can't recall other ingredients she put in. And I can't recall how long she would let it sit. And after a certain amount of time, she knew when it was ready to be bottled. And we had a homemade bottle, and we would help her bottle the home brew and the root beer. And we look forward to that. And her beer was legendary because, like I said, people visited people back then, and vice versa. And so when they came to our house, she would always offer them the homemade root beer. And they would look for it from year in and year out. They would look for it and come and talk about how good it was. Of course, I don't know because I didn't drink it. We didn't drink it, didn't try to sip it, but she made root beer for us. And that was a real pleasure. But on Christmas, we would always go to my grandmother's house. The family would go together at my grandmother's house for dinner. And we'd have a great time there and close family friends. And on New Year's Eve, just a week later, they would all come to our house and they would celebrate the New Year's, and every time when the New Year's would come in, everybody would get on their knees and pray and thank God for the year that they had and for blessings in the new year. And so Christmas was a great time for us, and we enjoyed it very much. And coming back to high school again, I graduated. I want to talk about my brothers during the war. My oldest brother was drafted into World War II and into the Navy, and he did his basic training over at the Bainbridge, and we didn't know what the future had held for him because the war was raging at the time. And when he had finished his basic training, he came home and he brought his duffel bag and he was telling us about his experience in basic training. And he was showing us the book that he had to learn all these different knots, the different knots they had to tie, and he was show us how to tie the knots and gave us the book and said, now y'all learn how to do this, you go to the Navy like I did. But fortunately, he did not ship out. He stayed in Bainbridge for the duration of the war. He did not have to go into combat, and we were grateful for that. And then I had another brother who was drafted into the Army just shortly after the war. So it was two sets of us. My mother and dad had two older brothers, and about 10 years later, my younger brother and I came along, So they were pretty much, when we were like 5 or 6 years old, they were pretty much ready to leave the roost. But we do have some good times together. But fortunately, like I said, my brother didn't have to go off to combat in the World War, and my other brother was drafted shortly after the war, so he didn't have to face combat either. So we was grateful for that. But now I want to jump back. I'm going back and forth because got to high school. I told you about experiences with the football team and whatnot, and the comparisons of the school. So when I graduated from Parker Gray, I went to college at Howard University for a while, and then I dropped out. Subsequently, later years, went to American University where I got my degree, and worked in the federal government for like 31 years, and I retired, and so I had a nice career in the federal government. Also, in 1975, when like jumping back and forth, like I said before, we formed the Parker Gray Alumni Association, and one of the purposes of the Alumni Association was to keep the memory of Parker Gray alive as long as we could. But since we weren't getting any more new alumni in, so I can't recall, we had the first school reunion in 1976. It was a large school reunion held at Marriott Twin Bridges, which is no longer there anymore. It's been gone for a long time. But one of the purposes of establishment was to establish scholarships for graduates of Parker Gray, in which we did. And we did it quite successfully for quite a while. As a matter of fact, the Parker Gray School itself was only in existence for 45 years. And the Alumni Association was able to stay in existence for 45 years. So during that time, we gave out scholarships to the descendants of the graduates from Parker Gray. And we stayed in existence long enough after we gave the descendants of Parker Gray, we gave it to the children of Parker Gray alumni. Then we were able to give it to the grandchildren of the Parker Gray Alumni Association. And we were able to do this until 2021, in which the membership dwindled down because of attrition, because of, like I said, we wasn't getting any new blood into the Alumni Association because we no longer had school. So we had to go out of business. But we did give out, I'm trying to remember how many $1,000 we gave out in in August of 2021. So we were able to keep the name of Parker Gray alive. And the name of Parker Gray is still will not fade into existence like the school, because they have a historic Parker Gray district, which you may be familiar with. They named the stadium up at Alexandria Public School now Parker Gray. And so the name of Parker Gray will, even though there will, as time goes on, people like myself who graduated from Parker Gray many years ago will pass from the scene. The name of Parker Gray will stay in existence and be remembered for years to come. Because the Johnson Pool didn't open until 1950, I believe. So prior to that time, the Alexandria Recreation Department would take kids to pools in D.C. or down to Fort Belvoir. And so during the summer, you would just play, because there was a lot of undeveloped land out in Sunnyside where I lived, and we would just play. Ride our bicycles. As you got old enough to ride bicycles, we just ride bicycles, play baseball, play basketball, and when the pool came in existence, just go to the pool sometimes. So, well, I would say my parents did. That was I looked up to my parents, and I looked up to my older brothers too. You have older brothers, which my brothers were quite a bit older than I was. So I looked up to them, but they weren't my mentors. But I looked to my parents as mentors, and I looked to my grandparents. They didn't have much education at all. As a matter of fact, for my father, he only went to the 6th grade. And my mother, growing up, she had a pretty good middle-class existence because she was born in 1903, and she grew up on in the 200 block of King Street. And her father ran a barber shop, and her mother, my grandma, was a seamstress. And they lived in, the house they lived in was like 207 King Street, as a matter of fact. And she lived there for 40 years. But the owners did not want to sell her the property. She wanted to buy it, but they wouldn't sell her the property. So she eventually moved from there in 1948, moved up on the 20 block of Alfred Street. So, but my grandfather, my mother's mother, was a very successful proprietor. He owned a barber shop. And so it's told he would cut black and white hair back then, back in the early 20th century. Matter of fact, he owned a barber shop from 1898 till 1908. And he drowned in the Potomac River in a boating accident. But she had a nice childhood, so she claims, and when she graduated from Hollowell School, which was a school for black girls up on the 20 block of Alfred Street, her mother could afford to send her to Washington, because there was prior to that time, 1920, there was no black schools, high school, so she sent her to our school in Washington, D.C., so she could get her high school education, which she graduated from Armstrong High School. Well, we didn't get in trouble. We really didn't. I mean, we just had too much to keep us occupied, And like I say, as I look back, I had a great childhood. Even though it was a hard existence for my parents. Being young, we didn't know the difference. But like I say, we didn't have a running water until 1949, as I said before. And we didn't have sewer. You had what they call Johnny House. I don't know if you ever heard of Johnny House before. But you had to go outside in the shed, and the basically built, to relieve yourself. So, and she had to, like I told you, wash clothes on the washboard and whatnot, and hang them up. And so, it was kind of rough. But for kids, I mean, we enjoyed ourselves. But it got better for them as time went on. It did. It did. It was very, very close neighborhood. It's just, compared to growing up then and growing up now, there's just no comparison at all, actually. Because things were segregated then, and even though in the center city, it was pockets where whites and blacks lived together, but out there, this was it was kind of really unique because it was, like I say, 15 families, and it was a little enclave. It's surrounded by nothing but whites, and so we're pretty much self-sufficient, and you I hate to use this term, but you knew your place, and so we never had any problem with white and blacks, as far as skirmishes or anything like that, and it was a peaceful coexistence actually. Yeah, that's no longer in existence anymore, because things are so transient now, and the 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 pockets of Alexandria where most of the blacks live in this district right here, uh, they just kind of once the 1964 Housing, Discrimination Act was passed, it just kind of gradually broke down, and people tend to move out, They wanted to experience something different, and so they did. And as a result of those who came along later, they wanted to live closer in. And so as you can see now, most of the center city here is almost all white. And there are very few blacks that left, whereas before, when I was growing up, a percentage of blacks, I guess it was 80%, 90%. Now it's reversed. Well, other than all the infrastructure that has come in, and they are trying to keep like I used to live in on Alpha Street. I moved into my grandmother's house, and she passed away. And for a while there, you couldn't hardly do anything, unless you got the approval from the zoning planning commission. But it seems like to me now they're getting so much pushback that they're just kind of relenting on their strict codes that they used to have. I don't know if that's true or not, but with the buildings that are going up and what you see around here, it doesn't look like they're enforcing the codes like they used to. Maybe they have just relaxed them and keep them closer down toward the river or whatnot. But in this particular area right here, they were really very strict as to what you could do, the windows you could put in, the type of roofing, your siding, So I moved out of Alexandria in 1965. No, 1975. I lived here for 10 years, and then I moved out into Fairfax County, where I still live. But my heart is in Alexandria. I'm so I think blessed to have been growing up in the city. Even though I look back, things weren't equal. We knew they weren't equal, but we had a good time growing up still. I can't imagine what it'd been like if we had equality. I don't know. I guess more of our kids would have gone to college. I don't know, but we still enjoyed ourselves in spite of all the oppression that we had to go through. That's a good question, and I have to ponder over that for a while, because I had to give really a good answer. I'm not really sure, but I think one of the things I would say is that, to maintain your family history and document your family history, because it's so important, because memories fade and time goes on, and it's nothing passed on from one generation to the next, because whereas we as blacks can only go back in terms of family history maybe to the Civil War, maybe shortly, somewhat before that. So as time goes on, I think they would like to preserve their history going forward. So my advice was to maintain your family history, because where you have opportunity to do that now, your generations that preceded us did not have an opportunity to do that. I have not explored my family history that much in depth myself, but I do have, I think it's my great-great-grandfather was born in 1846, I do believe. It's on my father's side, yeah. And he was somehow, he wasn't, I don't know if he was drafted in the Confederate Army or not, but I do know he was a deserter. So maybe he was, I don't know if he was he wasn't a soldier, but anyway, he was, I guess, I don't know if he had some civilian that were attached to the military, but I do know he deserted his position that he had in the Confederacy. So, but that's about all I know of him. And so it's hard for us to research our history because a lot of it is not even available to us. You actually have to take a deep dive, in doing so. Well, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for this project. I think it's very worthwhile. It's recording our history that, if not done by this project, would be lost. And I don't know if the generations that are coming after appreciate as much about the history as they should. I try to impress upon my grandkids about that, and they don't seem to grasp it. They listen to you and say yes, but they don't seem to be, not necessarily on fire for it. They don't seem, in my opinion, to really grasp the interest in it, So